Hey there. Okay, I had a close moment there. I wasn't quite ready to go, but now I am. Hey, we're having a surprise guest today, and it's a surprise because I reached out to her this morning to see if she might be willing to join us. I've mentioned her a couple times last week for sure. Her name is Linda Howard, and she is okay, I told you before, I always get her title wrong. She's the Associate Publisher of Children and Youth at Tyndale House Publishers, and she is basically the person who, it's more complicated, right? But she gave the green light to Sunlit Lands. She is the one that made it a possibility for us, one of a handful of people. So we're very excited that Linda will be joining us. What I'll do is I'll read our chapter for the day. And then for those who want to hang out and chat with Linda, she'll join us on the back end there of the show. Let's see. Okay, people are starting to say their hellos. Here we are. Hi, Deborah. Good to see you. I see we've got. We must have almost everybody because our views are pretty close to what we typically have. So hello, everyone. Oh, I did the drawing for the winning the Arabella of Mars. It's very exciting. As I told you yesterday, what I did was I just took all of the likes and comments and shares and all of those things, put a certain number in of your name for the number of comments, shares, likes, and etc. you had, put them all in order, and then a random number generator. And here's who won. Sarah Scales. Hello, congratulations. So Sarah, send me a note. I think we're friends on Facebook. So just send me a message on Facebook. Let me know if you guys want a physical copy, just get me the address and I'll send it to you. Or if you want an ebook, let me know what kind of ebook you use and I will hook you up with a gift card to get the book from the e-vendor of your choice. So congratulations, Sarah. Sarah Atkinson is with us today. She says all good things go to Sarah's. It's true. Sarah's are the best. Sarah Atkinson, her official title, I believe, is Grand Ruler of Tyndale. I asked her to join us on the show today, and she said that she wanted to wait to be the last one to share because she's the most important one. So Sarah will be joining us eventually if I can convince her. I'm going to do a phone call on Thursday to try and convince her to go next time. Let's see. We got a couple more comments here. Hi, this is Neil with my sisters and mom. Excited for more. Hey, Neil. Thanks for leaving a comment. And I see, yay, you guys won. Good job. And Jess caught up and made it to the live show. Jess, congratulations and welcome. Sarah is saying, now look, Sarah, she says, that's not what I said. Nobody listened to that. Come on now, Sarah. I can control whether people can see this comment, so I have nothing to hide because I'm just sharing what is true. So I can share these things. Okay. Well, let's jump in and start the chapter because I want to make sure there's plenty of time for Linda. With Linda, as I said, she's the Associate Publisher of Children and Youth at Tyndale. So if you have questions about young adult or children's literature, so all the way down to picture books, up through young adult, so maybe even new adult, so books targeting teens, late teens, even early 20s. Linda knows tons about all of that. Or if you have questions about the Crescent Stone and how it came to be, Linda obviously has been deeply involved in all of that. From the very beginning, from the very first pitch, she and Sarah Atkinson are the two people who were at that meeting. They bought me lunch and it was delicious. Thank you, Sarah. So let's jump in. What's happened so far, as you may recall, is that Madeline Oliver has a terminal illness. She can't breathe. And hey, Ryan's here too. Oh, sorry, everybody. We got to congratulate. Hey, Ryan. Thanks for coming, man. So Madeline Oliver, she's been sick. She can't breathe. She faints in her chemistry class, and her chemistry partner, Jason Wu, and her ex-boyfriend, who she's still in love with, Darius, take her to the hospital. While at the hospital, time stops completely, and a stranger comes in, an Elenil, someone from another magical land, comes and says that his people, the Elenil, will heal Madeline if she agrees to go work for them in the Sunlit Lands in a war against these terrible people called the Skim for 1 human year. Jason convinces her not to immediately do it. She needs to bargain or at least think about this. But as soon as time starts again, her breathing gets worse and she realizes this is a life or death decision. And she sends Jason to find the Elenil, and he does. He finds Hanalei, an old man, a priest, tries to warn him against making a deal. But Jason not only makes a deal for Madeline, he makes a deal for himself. So Madeline, after a year, will get all of her breathing back, complete healing, no strings attached after that. Jason makes a deal that he won't swear allegiance to the Elenil. He'll swear allegiance to Madeline for the same year. And in exchange, he gets 1 chocolate pudding cup every morning at breakfast for life, which Hanalei, the Elenil, is very confused by and thinks that maybe there's a trick involved, but he goes ahead and makes the deal. So that's where we pick up. Jason has just gotten to Darius, the ex-boyfriend, and given Darius the bracelet to deliver to Madeline. As soon as she puts it on, she should be able to breathe again or be on the way to breathing again. So Darius breaks into the room, runs past the nurses and everyone, and tries to deliver the bracelet. And that's where we pick up in chapter 6, To the Ends of the Earth, it's called. And here's the epigraph, says this: "How can I be loyal to the king and disloyal to my beloved friends? I will never leave you. I will follow you to the ends of the earth." Prince Ian, in The Gold Firethorns, which is a novel by Mary Patricia Wall. Darius saved her. Whatever came later, that was something to remember. It was Darius who saved her life. The room was crowded with people in scrubs, and the blaring screams of the machines, the clipped orders from the doctor, the quick replies of the nurses. Darius burst in, spinning past the nurse who stepped in front of him. He danced through the crowd of medical people until he arrived on the left side of her bed and slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. The bracelet did nothing for a terrifying 3 seconds. Then it tightened. It kept tightening until it was cutting into her skin. She gasped, and then the burning started. The bracelet seared her like it had been in an oven. It glowed furnace bright. Just when she thought she couldn't bear it, the bracelet cooled. On her left wrist was the lattice work of a silver tattoo, and the clouded jewel had grown to the size of a watch's face, glowing beneath her skin. And she could breathe. The sudden burst of oxygen rushed to her head, and a dizzy wave of giddiness washed over her. She was breathing again, gulping in the sterile, cool hospital air. She wrapped her arms around Darius and felt his strong arms encircle her, almost lifting her from the bed. The doctors pulled him away. Someone called for security, and Madeline tried to object, but she was so shocked she couldn't speak. She just kept breathing. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like she could keep breathing forever, like a normal person, breathe for 10, 20, 70 years without thinking about it. A security guard had Darius by the arm and was pulling him out of the room. "Can you breathe?" Darius shouted. "Yes, thank you," she said, but it was more whisper than words, and she wasn't sure that he heard. She wanted to tell the guard to let him stay. She wanted to explain to the doctors that she was okay now, but she was overwhelmed, confused, and breathing. There was scarcely room in her head for anything but that. A smile like sunlight spread across his face. "I'll wait for you downstairs," he called. "I won't leave." Tears welled up in her eyes. Darius always said that, "I won't leave." She knew it was true. He had already stuck with her through some terrible things, and there was no evidence he would stop. It was what Prince Ian said to Lily in The Gold Firethorns, the 3rd Masselia book. "I will never leave you. I will follow you to the ends of the earth." That's what Darius always said to her. When she first started to get sick, when the diagnosis came, when she couldn't stand the thought of seeing another doctor's face, to the ends of the earth. She heard Darius scuffling with the security guard until the door closed, muffling the sound. She laid her head on the stiff hospital pillow. Madeline's head throbbed where it had hit the classroom floor when she fainted earlier. But her lungs felt brand new. She could run a marathon. She could do jumping jacks or swim or dance or sing at the top of her lungs or yell at someone, and still she could breathe. The doctors ran tests, tested her oxygen levels, listened to her lungs. They didn't have much to say. They weren't sure what had happened. But in the past, her lung capacity had seemed to come and go. They wanted to keep her for observation. Given what had happened with Darius barging in, they said no one else could come in until her parents arrived. No one mentioned the bracelet. They didn't comment on the tattoo. It's like they hadn't seen that part. Had only noticed a high school boy bursting into the room, hugging her, and being dragged away. But between nurse visits, Jason slipped in. He had a pudding cup in one hand and a silver tattoo on his other wrist. People say tattoos hurt, but I barely felt this one. You have one too? Relief flooded her. She wouldn't have to go alone. Your friend Handy gave it to me. I figured I'd put mine on today to guarantee we'd go together to the Sunshine Place. Madeline looked at Jason. What did you promise to him? What are you giving up? Jason shrugged. I get to go with you, and they give me snacks. Madeline's stomach dropped. Jason, you're leaving behind your life for a year. You don't have to do that. The edges of Jason's lips twitched up. Well, I would have flunked chemistry without a partner anyway. Might as well take a gap year. But your parents, Jason didn't let her finish, are going to be fine, if not happy, to see me gone. Madeline couldn't imagine that was true. Picturing Jason's parents and their grief somehow made it more real. Her parents would be going through the same trauma. Are my parents here yet? Jason shook his head. Darius texted them, though. If her dad was in a meeting, he wouldn't look at his phone for hours at a time, and her mom often left hers in the car. I guess we can wait to leave until they get here? Do you want to say goodbye to your parents? Jason shook his head. Hanley said that unless we start our journey, the magic stops working. Like, if the magic thinks you're not going to follow through, it takes away your breathing. We should get going soon. Now that he mentioned it, she did notice a hitch in her breathing, so slight and so small compared to what she had been living with up until now, but definitely there. She took a deep breath, amazing that she could do that again, and reflected on leaving home. This was going to be hard. She couldn't imagine missing her birthday, missing Christmas and Thanksgiving and 100 other little family traditions, but she reminded herself she probably wouldn't have made it to Christmas anyway. She needed to set aside the chaotic mess of excitement and fear and sadness and confusion and loss and get ready. Maybe she could send a message to her parents, although she didn't think they'd believe it for a second. Still, it was time to go. Close the curtain, she said to Jason. He pulled the curtain shut around the bed. With you on the other side, dummy, she said. I'm going to get dressed. Jason blushed and disappeared through the curtain. Her shoes and socks were in a bag hanging at the end of her bed, but the rest of her clothes were gone. Right, they had cut her out of her clothes. It had been an emergency. They'd been moving fast. She put on her socks and sneakers. You can come back in, she said. Jason looked at her hospital gown. Bold fashion statement, he said. I like the shoes. Madeline wrapped a blanket around her back. She slipped the oxygen tube out of her nose, something she'd done 100 times before. Hopefully this would be the last time. I'll need help getting the IV out. Jason looked at her arm, his face pale. Maybe I should go find some clothes for you. He disappeared, and the sound of the door clicking shut echoed in the small room. Fine. She didn't need his help. She peeled up the edges of the tape on her inner elbow and pulled both sides toward the center. I maybe should have given you a content warning here. The needle bit deep. She wasn't sure how to turn off the drip or if there was some special way to pull out the needle. People are fainting in my house, sorry. She grabbed the base of it, her hand shaking, and with the smoothest motion she could muster, pulled the needle away from her arm. She gasped. It was out, still drooling liquid onto the floor. A pinprick of blood welled up. A quick rifle through the bedside drawers produced a small piece of cotton, which she put over the wound. She found a roll of colored Coban to wrap around her arm and bit the edge to tear it. Jason ducked under the curtain with some folded green scrubs. His shirt had brown stains dripping down the front. "What happened?" she asked. I spilled chocolate pudding all over my shirt and went in the waiting room and started shouting that I was covered in blood and needed a change of clothes. He looked down at his jeans, which were also covered in pudding. "I got you some pants, too. I'll wait outside." She tugged the pants on. They tied at the waist, so although they were baggy, they would stay up. The top slipped on easily. She found a rubber band in the drawers and pulled her hair back, wincing at the tender spot on the back of her head. The strange silver markings of her bracelet tattoo glimmered even under the fake light in the hospital room. The jewel glowed under her skin, but it didn't hurt. They slipped out of her room and into the elevator. Darius was downstairs in the waiting room. Darius gave Jason a funny look when they came out of the elevator together, but then he was wrapping Madeline in his arms. She leaned into the hug, thankful for him, thankful he was here and had brought her the bracelet, and glad that, for a moment at least, this seemed uncomplicated and normal. "Did they release you already?" he asked. "Shouldn't they do some more tests?" Madeline squeezed his hand. "Darius, there aren't more tests. We know everything there is to know." He lowered his head, a look she had seen too often on his face since her diagnosis. "Okay," he said, "I know that. Can I give you a ride home?" A sharp pain came from the bracelet. "I can't go home." The whole story came pouring out. Darius held her hand loosely, his eyes on hers the entire time she spoke, but he didn't speak until she was done. "So the magic works." She lifted her left hand so he could see the silver network of tattoos. 100%. Darius's face filled with wonder. "Madeline, it's everything we dreamed about. It's just like the griffin under the stairs." She nodded, smiling. "Finally, something is working. There really is magic. So we're going to fight these, what are they called again? Skim. We're going to fight the Skim, and in a year we're coming back." Madeline pulled her hand away when he said we. Of course he would say that, but there was no guarantee he could come. He hadn't made a deal. He hadn't seen Hanali. Jason said, "I don't think you have a ticket." He held up the silver tattoo on his wrist. "I'm coming," Darius said, glaring at Jason. "Darius," Madeline said, "your parents." "We'll be back in a year," Darius said. Jason was getting nervous. "Can we take this outside before someone comes looking for the kid who checked herself out of the hospital?" Madeline led them out to the street. She walked with purpose away from the automatic doors and toward 23rd. Darius paced beside her, and Jason brought up the rear, his hands in his pockets, his shirt and jeans still covered in pudding. She knew Darius wouldn't be able to go. She felt it as deep and certain as the magic moving through her. That was how it worked. She had read all the books. Darius didn't see Hanali. Darius didn't make a deal. Darius wouldn't be able to cross into the Sunlit Lands. That didn't mean they couldn't try, but she tried to think of a way to make it noble, make it helpful for him to stay. "I need someone to explain all of this to my parents," she said. Darius laughed. "Your parents will call the cops if I tell them this. I could leave a note with you or send them a text." But her phone was still at the school in her backpack. Her tattoo twinged, and Jason gave a yelp at the same moment. She knew which way to go, sort of. It seemed to be almost pulling her off the main street down a narrow alley. "You're right," Madeline said, stepping around a dank puddle. "Don't tell them anything. I don't want you to get in trouble." "How about I just come with you? Then this won't be an issue at all." "Okay," Madeline said, exhausted. "Come with us." Darius winced when she said us. The bracelet was guiding them into an old neighborhood. If she went too slow, her breath started to go ragged. She moved quickly, following it toward the end of a long cul-de-sac. A chain-link fence surrounded a low spot where long grass grew in a slight depression. All the neighborhood's runoff water eventually came through here. No one stirred in the neighborhood. No one opened a door or looked out a window. A hummingbird sat on the fence, chirping. That was weird. She hadn't noticed a hummingbird doing that before, and it seemed larger than usual. She thought back to the bird that had been talking to the woman in her garden. Could it be the same one? Could the garden lady have sent it? Madeline rubbed her chin. "I think we're supposed to climb this fence," Jason groaned. "Tell me we're not about to crawl through a drainage ditch." He wrapped his fingers through the chain-link fence and pressed his face against it. "I can smell it from here." "I'll go first," Darius said, but when he put his hands on the fence, a brilliant flash of light knocked him backward. He lay on the ground, smoke rising from his clothes. Madeline's heart leapt into her throat. She ran to Darius and knelt beside him. She helped him sit up. Are you okay? Electric fence? Darius asked, still dazed. I'm still holding on to it, Jason said. The hummingbird chirped and flew to the other side of the fence, zipping back and forth in a strange, almost hypnotic pattern. We should come back with a ladder, Darius said. Madeline considered, but her breath went immediately ragged. I can't wait. Darius frowned. I always told you I'd follow you to the ends of the earth. Madeline smiled and pulled him into a warm embrace. In the gold firethorns, Lily betrays the Eagle King. Ian, Prince of the North, escorts her to the edge of Massalia after she is banished. In one of Madeline's favorite moments of the whole series, he lays his crown down at the border and steps across with her. He says, how can I be loyal to the king and disloyal to my beloved friends? I'll never leave you. I'll follow you to the ends of the earth. Madeline leaned back so she could see Darius's face. But do you remember what happens in the story? Darius nodded, a frown returning to his face. Lily sends Ian back to serve King Kartal, and she heads into the wilderness alone. He watches her disappear into the mist, and people call him Prince Ian the Sorrowful in the years to come. Except I'll only be gone a year, Madeline said, and when I come back, things will be normal again. Darius squeezed her shoulder. It's not how it works, Maddie. You don't go away for a year and come home to normal. You come back and everything has changed. She didn't answer him because she knew he was right. She stood and he stood beside her. So I guess this is the ends of the earth, she said. On the bright side, Jason said, still at the fence, she'll be fighting evil monsters during the year, so there's that. Darius frowned. How is that a bright side? Jason shrugged. Monsters are bad. Somebody's got to fight them. Ignore him, Madeline said. She pulled Darius's forehead against hers. I'll miss you, she said, but a year from now, I'll be able to breathe. I'll be able to live life again. Darius sighed, a deep, resigned sound. It's only a year, he said. Tell my parents, tell them something. Tell them I'm okay. She shook her head. Or don't tell them anything. I don't know what's best. Do what you think is right, Darius. I know the right thing to do already. I'm going to find a way to come to you, Darius said, and she knew it was true that he would try. One more hug for Darius, as long as she dared, until her breathing started to go ragged. When she stepped away from him and toward the fence, her breath returned. Jason stood near the fence. He cupped his hands into a stirrup. I'll boost you. Madeline laughed and leapt onto the fence. She slung herself over and dropped to the ground on the other side. She could breathe. She'd never need help to jump or run or scale a fence again. Jason, on the other hand, appeared to have never climbed a fence in his life. She tried to coach him, and he fell off twice. Eventually, Madeline leapt back over the fence and cupped her hands into a stirrup. She boosted Jason to the top, and he made his way to the other side with the help of a mist rung and gravity. I did it, he shouted. King of the world! They grinned at each other. Madeline looked back to Darius, but the world on the other side of the fence looked gray and sluggish like a video in slow motion, covered with a thick fog. Magic? She asked. No turning back now, I guess, Jason said, but that had never been a real possibility. Madeline shouted goodbye to Darius and told him they were safe, but he moved so slowly she couldn't tell if he heard. She wrapped her fingers in the chain-link fence, trying to see him more clearly, but the fog only grew thicker. She could barely see him now. Madeline whispered another goodbye. The space between them had already begun to grow. The hummingbird zipped in front of her face, and she spun to watch it, but she couldn't see where it had gone. She didn't think the bird had crossed outside the fence. The drainage area wasn't huge, but it was clear of fog, and there wasn't another way out that she could see. A cement pipe protruded from the ground, just big enough that Madeline could crawl in on her hands and knees. A sludge of accumulated mud coated the bottom. A flicker of light came from far down the pipe. Do you think this? I absolutely do not, Jason said, but she knew this was the way. Of course it was. They stared at it for a full 5 minutes, neither of them speaking. Her breathing didn't change, but she knew. I have to, she said at last. Jason shook his head. There's no way Hanley crawled through there. The hummingbird appeared between them, then darted into the pipe. A chirp echoed back. Madeline glanced at Jason. You saw that, right? I did not see that, Jason said, crossing his arms. Madeline put her hand on the lip of the pipe. She wrinkled her nose. A dank smell of ancient, decayed leaves and old mud came from the darkness, but there was light further down. She could see it now for sure. She took a deep breath, thankful once more that she could breathe at all, and crawled into the tunnel. The mud squished beneath her hands and knees, but she moved steadily forward. She felt a lightness, a relief to be moving in the right direction. She would miss Darius and her family and her friends, but she was glad to be moving, to be breathing, to be headed toward health and freedom. If only Darius could have come. From somewhere behind her, Jason said, "Seriously, Hanali would never get his costume dirty like this." She smiled, glad for Jason's company, and crawled steadily toward the dim light ahead. And that is the end of chapter 6. And I see that Linda is here with us. So give me just a second. We will bring her in. Hey, Linda. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Great. So glad. Thank you for making time at the last minute to join us.
Oh, this is fun. I'm happy to do it.
Look, I even got your title right.
Whoa, so special.
I went and got it off of LinkedIn because I always say it wrong.
I like that you make me a VP. It makes me happy.
That's what I usually say. Yeah, that you're a VP. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, we have a bunch of folks here. The live stream is actually 20 to 30 seconds behind us. So hopefully we'll get a few questions in a minute here. But why don't we start with, I've already told them this last week about how we went to lunch, and you had already told me you wanted a fantasy series that dealt with issues of race and privilege. Tell us a little bit more about that. Why were you seeing that as a need in the market at the time? Oh, look, there's Allie. She's so excited. She loves Linda so much. She was like, "You're having Linda on. I want to see Linda."
I just think where our society and all the things that we're struggling with right now, some of the things that come to the top on a regular basis are that race and privilege, and really trying to understand what that means in people's everyday lives. And one of the best ways I have always found that we can teach is through story. And so finding a great story about this, and for that YA audience, was something that I was really really wanting to find and find it done really well. And then you wrote the Crescent Stone, and I was like, this is it. This is what I wanted. Because I just think it handles it in such a beautiful way. It's not a preaching at you, telling you all the things you're doing wrong. It's helping people to see, think for themselves and figure it out for themselves. And I love that.
Yeah, that was something I remember. Even when we were at lunch, we were kind of talking together, because obviously the book wasn't written, and I had just given a pitch, kind of what the story could be. And I remember you and Sarah asking some different questions about, well, what's happening here or there? And like, as the three of us talked, we were kind of saying, like, actually, it'd be great if it was just really complicated, and that there wasn't a clear, like, here's what you should do, this is the answer, but more that this was a world that lets us wrestle with some hard questions that might have echoes in the real world.
Yes.
So,
yeah. And I love that, because I don't think people are necessarily looking for us to tell them what to do. I think they're looking for us to help them think about things in a different way. And that's the beauty of story, I think.
So tell me a little bit about, so Tyndale House Publishers is a Christian publishing house. So tell us a little bit about when you took your role as associate publisher of children and youth. What's your philosophy? What are you looking to do? What kind of books are you wanting to make at Tyndale for kids and teens and young adults?
Yeah, for me, it's really looking for things that help point people to Christ. But I feel like, Tyndale's mission is to really make God's word more clear through, boy, I'm having a moment here, senior moment, through content that is scripturally relevant, but that doesn't mean that it has to be that we're beating people over the head every time with, the gospel right in your face. You're gonna die if you don't listen. I'm not looking for that, because I think people are on a spectrum in their walk, in knowing Christ, in understanding who Christ is and understanding what Christianity is about. So what I really want to be able to do is reach people where they are. So books like The Crescent Stone, which does have a Christian worldview, but is not overtly Christian, for me, are every bit as important as some of the other books that we do that are very overtly Christian. So what I'm looking for is ways to find books and stories that reach people where they are.
That was something I really loved when I was talking with you and Sarah about the Sunlit Lands books, was that, I didn't want to have Aslan in the book, like the Jesus lion, right? Although I love the Narnia books, like really love them. Because my experience is that I don't, at the end of every adventure, have a magical lion show up and speak to me. Like there's clear evidence of the moving of God in my life, but that's not what it is.
Yes.
For me, that's not my experience typically, right? So I love that you guys gave the freedom for that. A couple comments. Sarah Atkinson says it's a real shame because she loves telling people what to do.
She's very good at it.
She really is. She's so gifted in so many ways, and that is one of them. And then at home, the Scales family wants to know, Linda, can you give a few recommended titles to check out for young adult and middle grade readers?
Boy, specific titles. That's a little bit hard off the cuff. Obviously,
well, give us a couple from Tyndale, and then a couple you love elsewhere too.
Obviously, The Crescent Stone, Heartwood Crown, two of my all-time ever favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to say that because you're on my show. So
I would say that even if I wasn't on your show. I do. I think they're amazing books. Also, we have, these are a little darker, for lack of a better word. We have The Delusion and The Deception. And that's a spiritual warfare series that we've done at Tyndale, and they're really so good.
Those are young adult, right?
Those are young adult. And they have the demonic, kind of like if you've heard of Frank Peretti, his books, they're really similar to that in some ways, only with younger main characters. And where they're fighting demons and angels and all that kind of stuff. But they're really, really well done. Very well done. Some of the middle grade ones that I love that we have would be, we just released one called Hunger Winter. It's an excellent book, and it is about a boy whose dad is in the resistance during the World War II in Holland. And it's that there's a whole Hunger Winter was an actual thing when people were starving to death because of what the Nazis were doing. And this young boy, his dad is in the resistance, and he's gone. And then the older sister who's watching them is arrested by the Gestapo. And so this boy has to take his younger sister and go across Holland to the Netherlands. I said Holland, the Netherlands, to find his dad and his sister. So it's so well done. I would recommend that. It's really good. So well done that the Corrie ten Boom Museum is actually carrying it and selling it because so kind of true to what happened at that time. So that would be another one I would highly suggest. We have one if right now I think would be so fun for kids as parents are at home called Larger Than Life Laura. And it's a book that really teaches kids it's middle grade, teaches kids how to write a story. So it's a story about bullying, and it's really, again, so well written. It's Dandy Daly Mackle, but every chapter in the book is a different part of how you write a story. So she's got a chapter about the protagonist. She's got a chapter about the plot. And so while she's telling you this story of this girl who's being bullied, she's also teaching you how to write a book. So that's really, really well done.
And I know this is a little younger than middle grade, but the Dead Sea Squirrels books, which are chapter books, are written by Mike Naraki, who is Larry the Cucumber, for those who like Veggie Tales. And one of my teenagers is grinning on the couch right now because she loves those books. They're kind of like, I don't know if they're a little bit like Captain Underpants in the sense that there's like a bit of writing on each page and an illustration on every page.
Yes.
So they're very accessible for younger readers, but they're really goofy and funny and still enjoyable if you're older.
Yes.
Which maybe I'm revealing a lot about myself by saying that about Captain Underpants. But yeah, those are great books. Really enjoy
They
them.
are great. They're funny and fun. And Mike is just, Mike's the best.
Yeah, we might have to have Mike on to come hang out and talk like Larry for a while.
He would totally do it.
I know. He loves to do it. That guy. He's so funny.
Yes.
Deborah says the Frank Peretti books are scary. I think if you're scared from Frank Peretti, probably these are scarier than those, I feel like. Do you think so?
Scary. Yeah. I mean, there's a sense of the spiritual warfare being very real in everyday life in these books.
And it deals with some pretty heavy teen issues related to various issues that teens could have, including the most serious issues you'd probably run across.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, honestly, the first one is about suicide. There's a lot of suicide in there. And so there's definitely some heavy issues. This would be for older teens. I wouldn't want my 12-year-old reading them.
Yeah.
But your older teens, again, they really make you think and make you think about prayer and the difference, all of these things can make in our lives and as we're battling.
It's actually one of the things I love about young adult literature is that it opens a place to have conversations about these very serious topics that, when my kids were growing up, I didn't ever want to sit down with them and say, hey, let's talk about suicide. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's weird. It's awkward. But if you're reading a book together, there's a way in which you can talk about the book and it lets you talk about these issues. Same thing we're doing in the Crescent Stone, right?
Yes.
That we're bringing up really difficult issues related to power, privilege, all these other things. But it's not in our familiar context, which lets us talk about it without it being awkward and strange.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, well, Linda, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And thank you for all your support for the Sunlit Lands books. And really excited. I'm meant to be working every day on book 3 right now. And I am most days working on it some. So
every little bit. See, every few words, it just keeps.
I always hit my deadlines.
That's
so
right.
We're going to do it.
You can do it.
Linda, thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Matt.
Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to wrap up in a moment here, but I do want to remind you that coming this Friday, that we have Lorie Langdon joining us, author of Olivia Twist and a variety of other books. Lorie's an old friend, and I know you're going to enjoy her, and I suspect you will also enjoy her books. I certainly do. So that's this coming Friday. A reminder, if you're having a hard time finding the Crescent Stone to buy for yourself or others, like I've seen Amazon, I think is sold out of the paperback right now. Tyndale.com is still taking orders and sending books. So that's a good place to go. And of course, if you don't want to wait weeks and weeks to get to the end, the Crescent Stone, narrated by Natasha Sudek, is available from Oasis Audio, and she does a great job. Really enjoyed it. In fact, she also is the one who narrates the second book, The Heartwood Crown. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The more you like and comment, the more other people see these things show up, and the easier it is to find future installments. And of course, subscribing, if you're on YouTube, it's youtube.com/Matt Michelatis Books. And if you're on Facebook, it's facebook.com Michelatis Books. And either of those places, you can subscribe. Well, I guess in Facebook, it's, liking or joining. Sarah, by the way, says that they love both Peretti and Veggie Tales. So thanks for the recommendations. I think you guys will enjoy those. So, well, thanks everybody. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 Pacific for the next chapter, when we actually, spoiler, are going to make it to the Sunlit Lands by the end of tomorrow's chapter. So get ready for that. In the meantime, be safe, be well, and we'll talk to you soon.